It's always a bit overawing when I speak in front of Ken and Peter, because they both taught me a very long time ago, in the mid-60s. I'd like to begin, as I always do, by acknowledging that we are here today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Great Eora Nation and pay tribute to their elders. I'm a bit anxious about the talk anyway, because I'm invited really very much as an outsider, and might I add, a Sunderland supporter, to talk about this wonderful institution, CPACs. Although I might add, I have been a patron for probably about 15 years of the West Papua project, which is part of CPACs, and I'll talk a bit about that later. But I'm an outsider looking at a quite extraordinary institution, which has lasted for 25 years, which in itself is amazing. I'm so used to great organisations dwindling out at about, 19th, 20th year. They've existed with really no money, and as other institutions, similar institutions sort of wither away. I understand there's really only two left that are still have the name Peace in their title, and they're the only academic institutions willing to articulate alternatives to public policy. Now, I've come to talk here today in a month where we of the left laid to rest Tom Uren and Faith Bandler. And can I say, a moment that will remain with me forever is John Howard and Philip Ruddock sitting up the front of Tom Uren's funeral, because it was a state funeral, and the massed choir of the Solidarity Choir and the Trade Union Choir and a few other choirs, 70 people up on stage singing "The Sheds Will Be Sure Union" or "They Won't Be Sure at All," followed by "When They Jail a Man for Striking, It's a Rich Man's Country Yet." It was great to see the look on John Howard and Philip Ruddock's faces. What did these two funerals have in common? Both Faith and Tom were activists and organisers. Neither are known for their written work, although Faith wrote 6 books and Tom wrote an almost unreadable autobiography. But what we remember are those extraordinary pictures of Faith knocking on doors during the 1967 referendum, beautifully dressed, and we discovered at her funeral yesterday in the Great Hall, we discovered why she was always beautifully dressed was she used to be a dressmaker at David Jones, and so made her own clothes. But she also used to wear little white gloves because, as she told us later, it made the people she was meeting feel more comfortable when they had to shake hands with her because she had gloves on. But they're the enduring memories that you have of Faith's life. And of Tom, you don't think of him sitting at his table writing a book. You remember that great bull of a man standing at the front of the demonstrations, demonstrating against war, against the bomb, against environmental vandalism. So they were great activists, and they shared the same song at their funerals. Both funerals had Joe Hill. At Faith's funeral, it was that wonderful footage of Paul Robeson singing to the building workers on the forecourt of the Opera House, singing Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night. And for Tom, it was the massed choir singing it. But what's the line in Joe Hill that we all remember? I suppose, apart from "They shot you, Joe, said I." The line that everyone remembers from Joe Hill, and why it is a song that is played at old lefty funerals, is the final line, "Don't mourn but organise." And so much of what was said of Faith at Faith's funeral was about organising. And this is what's needed in the fight for peace. the fight for peace with justice, the ability to organise for it. And can I say, for an institution like CPACS, which is steeped in academia, and I think it's a wonderful story that you had to include conflict in the title because conflict was considered academic but peace wasn't. It's a very academic institution, CPACS. There is not a thing wrong with the academic qualifications or the work that it produces. It's a very fine academic institution. But CPACS has also been great at creating a space, both philosophical and geographic, for organising for peace. Geographically, it's important, and Stuart points this out too, that it sits over there in Arundel Street, facing out to the community. It's easy to find, and you don't have to make your way into Sydney University, which you all think is easy to find your way around. But anyone who hasn't spent... I spent 10 years all up at Sydney University, and I still had to ask where the Woolly building was. So the fact that CPACS is out there in the community is very important. One of the great moments of my life was welcoming Nelson Mandela to the Mackey building. And it was a wonderful thing to see him just getting out of his car and walking along the street, and the local gleebies all going, "Oh, I think that's Nelson Mandela," sort of a look of shocked horror on or surprise on their faces. It was what I always call a great glebe moment. But the existence of the Posters for Peace Gallery is very important. I realise I really had nothing much to do with CPACS, but I often ended up in the Posters for Peace Gallery being involved in different organisations. Don't ever underestimate the importance of a place where people can meet, think, discuss things, argue, have a coffee, use the photocopier, and what's most important, of course, go to the toilet. And I like the fact that on the CPACS website, it says CPACS hosts the Posters for Peace Gallery, a place where people can relax, read or meet to discuss common interests. So CPACS is actually encouraging people to use it in that communal way for communal organising. And I think it's quite a good time to reflect on CPAC's effectiveness in promoting activism and not just talk about their great written works. Often the writing and the activism is the same thing. The project that I was involved with, the West Papua project, produced a wonderful report on human rights abuses in West Papua, and Stuart remembers very vividly, getting the money for the camera and then stuffing it down John Wing's shirt so that they could take photographs in a fairly covert way for this terrific piece of work, written by John and Peter, and of course with a lot of support from the rest of the project team, but Joe Collins and Anne Noonan. Now, why am I referring to that? Because I saw firsthand how important it was, huge media coverage of it, conservative backlash, people were saying it's rubbish and it's all untrue, and you know when the conservative media and the institutions are saying that, you've probably hit a nerve. But I think it was really important because some years later, when the 43 West Papuans rowed across the water in their handmade canoe in order to apply for refugee status, it was very interesting. It was one of the few occasions when even the polling showed that Australian people believed that they should be accepted as refugees and that they were refugees, because enough had got into the Australian consciousness about human rights abuses in West Papua for people to understand that these were in fact refugees. To me, scholarship around peace and justice issues have to have an effect. If the learned articles and wonderful books sink into the black hole of erudition, then that's no good. I'm reminded of the good women of the peace movement. I've been looking at this recently. In the 40s and 50s and into the 60s, who too often spent their time at international conferences and came back and wrote self-satisfied books about their amazing peace work. But they did nothing in Australia to generate understanding or awareness of the issues. Often they themselves were a bit unaware of the issues. They liked going to the international conferences, but not much else came out of it. There's a wonderful series of notes between some of the women from WILPF and UAW who'd gone to yet another peace conference in India in the late 40s. The Australian women believe that world peace is the issue, whereas the Indian women aren't interested. Led by the formidable Kapila Khandawala, they say there is only one issue for us, and that's decolonisation. And this, of course, leads into the whole thing that CPAX is about, which is peace with justice. What is the point of world peace for a bunch of Indian women who still have white English masters? Right, I will finish now. I will say that, I'll quickly point to the fact that I think that of the 9 ways that we can look at the future that in Peter King's paper, I think the interesting thing about them is how practical they are. They are about organising for the future and about organising so that more activity can take place. Continue to be a voice for a kinder, gentler, more equitable economy, and continue to try to produce a national leadership that understand what peace with justice is, and try to help educate the community to be passionate and informed. That all may sound like Pollyanna, but hey, that's how you started out, so keep doing it. Thank you.